Before I started working on this video, I had a lot of trouble figuring out how to approach the idea of vertical gaming. What do I mean? Basically any kind of game that requires the player to navigate its gameplay mechanics on a y-axis. These include sky-high exploration shoot-'em-up titles, or shmups for short, like Mushihime-sama, Dodonpachi, or Ikaruga. Some other notable vertical style games I found out about include Commando from Capcom or Ikari Warriors from SNK. I'm not very fond of this concept, as most of my experience with vertical style games comes from playing smartphone titles such as Danmaku Unlimited or a Dragon Quest port like DQ5 or 8. Albeit that doesn't destroy my enthusiasm to try out games or devices that utilize this style of presentation and gameplay. The Bandai WonderSwan is a really good example of a console that utilized the concept of vertical gameplay by including titles that could be played on the console horizontally, like a traditional Game Boy Advance, and vertically, like a Game Boy Color. It presented the idea of dual-axis gameplay so well that it even included an extra set of buttons on the top left of the console for games meant to be played vertically. On the subject, I've been slacking on the idea of practicing a rhythm game that employs vertical gameplay that I can't believe I haven't been smacked upside the head for not playing this game much sooner. I mean, I thought I saw everything Konami had to offer with its DJ simulation style games through Beatmania alone, but this game showed me that there's more than one way to make a DJ arcade sim. Let me introduce you to Sound Voltex. Sound Voltex is a rhythm game released by Konami in 2012 and is part of the acclaimed Bemani series. Just like Beatmania, Sound Voltex partially simulates the disc jockey experience through its form factor, which I'll explain more in detail later on. There are currently 6 games in the series that were released in 2012, 13, 14, 16, 19, and 21. The latter of which, Exceed Gear, still being the current version of the game still available to play. Aside from its unique aesthetic and gameplay, a very nice feature that made Sound Voltex stand out in the Bemani library was its focus on fan-submitted material from aspiring artists, which are still used as avatars for the game's menu screen and soundtrack covers. From 2013 to 2021, the first 5 versions of the game were all published on the same cabinet until a new cabinet, known as the Valkyrie model, was featured by Konami starting from early 2021. The Valkyrie model was used to help make the 5th game in the series, Exceed Gear, make its official US debut. Sound Voltex has also been ported to PC as well, starting with the 3rd game in the series, Gravity Wars, in 2017. The PC port was updated to Exceed Gear in 2021. Before I start talking about the gameplay, let me level with you and mention this is by far one of the coolest rhythm games I've ever had the pleasure of fiddling my fingers around. Sound Voltex's gameplay is intuitive and engaging enough for any newbie of the rhythm game genre to get the hang of. The basic gameplay is like so. Every cabinet has 4 square keys, 2 rectangular keys underneath the main 4 known as effects keys, and the coolest feature, 2 effector knobs on the farthest left and right ends above the main 4. Every track starts with a small intro to get the player accommodated to the keys and finger placement of the cabinet. Each note is visually represented by a corresponding colored note represented on the music board. White notes represent the square keys, orange notes represent the FX keys, blue and red colored neon streaks represent the effector knobs. The basic interface displays the descending notes going down the music board in a top-down fashion and requires the player to match the timing of a music note with its matching colored key, and the effector knobs usually spice up a single by creating electro auto-tune sounding reverberations that enhance the musical flow of the track. Just like with every rhythm game, the scoring system is based on the player's ability to flawlessly land every music note without failover. Player performance is scored using 4 judgments starting from best to worst. S critical, critical, near, and error, each given to determine the accuracy of how well the player is maneuvering gameplay. When it comes to the form factor of a Sound Voltex cabinet, there are 2 versions of the cabinet, the standard version that contained the first 5 games and the Valkyrie model, an upgraded version of the cabinet that debuted with Exceed Gear. The standard model cabinet contains the most basic physical features to play the game, including the standard button and effector knob layout. Also, just like with its successive cabinet model, the standard model's form factor has vibrant LED lights inside of panels jutting out from both sides of the cabinet screen to give it the effect of immersing the player into the perspective of the gameplay, as if they're walking down an RGB hallway. The standard model cabinet does such an impressive job at accommodating players to the basic setup of sound Voltex that I couldn't believe Konami had more quality additions under their sleeve when they released the Valkyrie model. Just like how Beatmania has its own standard model cabinet and an upgraded version of it called the Lightning model, which includes an LCD touchscreen for additional sound modification, the Sound Voltex Exceed Gear Valkyrie model is much similar. The Valkyrie model also includes an LCD touchscreen for quality improvements. The overall form factor of the cabinet is very similar to the standard model, but is stylized in a method to blatantly draw attention to the new LCD screen. The panels on the side are less emphasized than the standard model, but are presented in a manner to look like they're jutting out from the section of the cabinet where the LCD screen is placed. I always loved Konami's tendency to upgrade their rhythm game cabinets to include additional screens. The visual sensation of this version of the cabinet is why Sound Voltex is so popular in the rhythm game community for its aesthetic. Speaking of which... This game oozes so much style. Upon first glance, it looks loud, in your face, and maybe a little too anime, but once you get accommodated and comfortable with the gameplay, it's like being sucked into a melodic audiovisual symphony. I know I started off this video mentioning my gripes with vertical style gameplay, but upon closer observation, you can tell that every aesthetic choice in the game, visuals, and the cabinet's form factor were intentional by design to complement the orientation of the cabinet's screen. The standard cabinet rocks at presenting stylized circuitry as the artwork displayed on its form factor, like you're viewing the controls of the game on top of a radically artistic motherboard. And the Valkyrie cabinet takes that neon-colored RGB inspired edge to the next level by making its form factor more bombastic than the standard model. The in-game visuals are always pleasing to look at. Like mentioned before, Sound Voltex's community puts a huge emphasis on fan-submitted artwork that's been used for the game's menu screens, soundtrack covers, and various avatars that the player can choose from to help navigate its options. This is definitely one of the most unique features the game has to offer, as Sound Voltex Exceed Gear alone already offers multiple original characters to choose from, each one more fashionable than the next. There's so much love that Konami pours into the Sound Voltex community, it's unbelievably beautiful how much fan support this game gets. I can't gush enough about Sound Voltex Exceed Gear's aesthetic, and that only pales in comparison to the absolutely banging soundtracks that Exceed Gear offers. On that subject, this game has so many good soundtracks. On the surface, just from looking at its aesthetic and soundtrack covers, Sound Voltex's music selection looks like it might be very anime heavy, but much to my surprise, I discovered that there were no covers in sight that I knew of, and I loved it. I got the opportunity to deep dive into the unknown and discover the game's library of original tracks that came in a wide variety of J-pop, EDM, and techno mixes. Even the title screen has a killer drum and bass mix that gets you fired up and ready to get in and shred its gameplay. I seriously don't know where or how to start gushing about the music in Exceed Gear 2, because I know that I only scratched the surface with the beats that I found. Despite that, what I came across exceeded my expectations, such as Exceed Gear more than delivers on offering amazing tunes that any gamer would love to casually listen to or add to their library of favorite video game soundtracks. And did I forget to mention how much of a bonus it is that every cabinet comes with the headphone jacks when I was talking about form factor? My biggest disappointment with the selection is that a good chunk of the most radical jams to listen to are available only on higher difficulties of the game, which is why I have to segue into... Sound Voltex's difficulties are numerically classified from levels 1 to 20. Normally, just like I do with almost every rhythm game, I had to get myself accustomed to playing the game by replaying one or two of the same tracks multiple times on easier difficulties before challenging myself to play the game on a higher level of trial. Little did I know, Sound Voltex's level of difficulty for each track is not clear-cut. What do I mean when I say that? What I mean is that you could be playing two songs that are numbered the same numerical difficulty, but are so mechanically different in gameplay that one song will seem like it's a different number entirely. If you're used to playing Beatmania, then you'll definitely understand the number of great tracks available to play from just from the lower level numbers. There are an unbelievable number of awesome soundtracks to practice playing just from levels 1 through 7. I honestly can't even get started describing what it's like to play Sound Voltex on any higher difficulty than level 10, but the challenge I was presented with on levels 5 through 9 were fair enough to adequately give me the experience I wanted and needed to share what it's like to play Exceed Gear on a level presentable enough for newcomers to the game, or rhythm games in general. So what's the most valuable thing I can ultimately say about the difficulty of the game from the levels I could handle it from? Well, when you get accommodated to Sound Voltex on levels 5 through 10, I would essentially call that this game's version of easy mode, and those levels would be the most optimal numbers to start from to help any newbie slowly work their way up to leveling up their experience with the game before entering levels 11 and beyond. Despite that, level 7 through 10 tracks still offered a fair challenge. Despite how much time I spent working on this video ever since I first announced it, I've enjoyed every minute of getting to know the world of Sound Voltex and its fandom. I'm disappointed that I wasn't able to play on the same level as some of the most skilled players of the game, but the adventure I embarked on just to explore its arcade scene filled me with a sense of satisfaction that surpassed my experience with my Beatmania review. I seriously can't recommend trying out Sound Voltex Exceed Gear enough for any gamer who is new to the rhythm game genre, or lost on what to try out at a Japanese-style arcade. The gameplay is stylish, the cabinet's form factor is too cool to ignore, especially the Valkyrie models. The artwork and aesthetic is off the wall, every title has so many great soundtracks that I've only scratched the surface of, and the difficulty will definitely have you coming back for more once you dip your toes into the best songs the easier difficulties have to offer. I wish there was more I could say, but I'd probably have to spend another decade polishing my skills. As for future content, I'll be switching gears and starting a new video series where I'll be exploring some of the most popular and unique card game scenes such as Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, Cardfight Vanguard, and my personal favorite, Digimon TCG 2020. Thank you to everyone who joined me on this thrill ride, and I'm looking forward to what I can offer next. Until then, stay frosty.